Hey everyone, and welcome back. We are diving into the surprisingly deep world of Ian Hawke from Alvin and the Chipmunks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Ian Hawke.
the villain from the movies.
Huh.
I know, right?
Yeah, this will be good.
So, to uncover his hidden depths, we're going through some old fan wiki pages. His backstory, his whole arc. There are even some quotes here. You actually sent me this one quote because you want to know if he was really a bad guy or just misunderstood.
Yeah, I mean, he always seemed like kind of a standard antagonist, but, I feel like there are these moments where you saw these little glimpses of something else.
Okay, so
Yeah.
let's go back to his early days then. The wiki actually paints this very interesting picture of his relationship with Dave, like going all the way back to their college years.
Wow.
So they were roommates and friends, but even then...
Even then, he kind of seemed a little dismissive of Dave's talent.
Right.
Almost threatened.
Like, they're supposed to be friends, but Ian is constantly downplaying Dave's music.
Yeah.
It's like he can see Dave's potential even before Dave can, and it just makes him uncomfortable.
And that's classic, right, that whole dynamic, like that underlying power dynamic where it's envy disguised as friendship. Like, think about the way he introduces Dave at parties. This is Dave Seville.
Yeah.
It's like he's trying to convince himself more than anybody.
Right. Like, maybe there's bitterness there.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, he's already comparing himself to Dave
Absolutely.
and coming up short.
And that brings us, of course, to the turning point, which is the Chipmunks themselves. The minute he realizes that they have musical potential, that's when the friendship really takes a nosedive. Because he goes straight into exploitation mode.
Oh, yeah.
Isolating the chipmunks, playing on their naivete.
Ugh, classic manipulator.
Telling them that Dave's holding them back.
Right. And he doesn't just do it to Dave, though, does he?
No, exactly. Look at how he interacts with the Chipettes in the second film.
Okay.
It's the same pattern.
Yeah.
Always looking for an angle, looking for that shortcut to success, even if it means manipulating these really talented performers.
Right.
And it makes you really question his values and his moral compass. Like, is it all about fame and fortune no matter the cost?
And that's what leads to what initially looks like Ian's downfall. But we'll get into that in just a minute because that's where the story takes a very interesting turn.
An unexpected turn?
So he lost everything, right? The money, the fame, his career, it's all gone. He even ends up in a dumpster at one point.
Right.
I think that's it. Like, classic villain falls apart, time to roll the credits.
And that's what's so interesting. Instead of this simple villain learns his lesson moment,
Right.
the third film throws in a curveball because where do we find Ian?
No, right.
He's working on a cruise ship dressed as a pelican.
You're kidding.
I know.
Oh, it's fantastic. But also, that's got to say something about his character.
Exactly. He has hit rock bottom.
Yeah.
But there's this glimmer of self-awareness.
Okay.
Like even humor in how he's handling it.
Right.
It's not redemption.
Yeah.
Not yet.
Yeah.
But it's hinting at something a little more complex.
Okay, so just when you think you haven't figured out, he pulls a 180.
Yeah.
He ends up helping Dave and the Chipmunks. They actually work together.
I know. Talk about subverting expectations.
Okay.
He could have easily just continued down this vengeful path, but instead he uses his street smarts,
Right.
his resourcefulness to help them.
And he's even kind of okay with making fun of his past mistakes, which
Yeah.
is honestly refreshing.
Yeah, I think so.
Because it's not that typical villain wants redemption
Totally.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
So let's take a step back for a second.
Okay.
What does this all mean?
Right.
What are we as the audience supposed to take away from his wild ride, antagonist, accidental hero, washed-up music producer? What's the deal?
I think he embodies a very specific type of ambition,
Okay.
the kind that is driven, resourceful, even charming,
Right.
but also incredibly destructive
Yeah.
to himself and to everyone around him.
Which brings up a really interesting point because even though he's made some questionable choices, when he's down on his luck, he never gives up.
Right.
There's this resilience about him that you kind of have to admire,
Absolutely.
even if it's misdirected.
Yeah. And it makes you wonder how much of that is his environment.
Right.
Like the music industry,
Yeah.
the pressure to succeed,
Wow.
always having to get to the next big thing.
Wow, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
It's not just him, it's everything around him.
Exactly.
See, this is why I love a good deep dive.
Right.
You start with what looks like a simple character from a family film,
Totally.
and suddenly we're asking all these questions about ambition and ethics and even what it means to succeed.
It's true, though. It's all there.
It really is. And, speaking of that ending with Ian and Dave working together,
Yeah.
Let's unpack that, because I think that reveals a lot about both of them. It's almost like that moment where they work together, where they collaborate, is a turning point for both of their characters.
Right.
Like they can finally see each other as more than just rivals.
Yeah, and it kind of speaks to that theme we keep coming back to, the complexity of human nature.
Right.
Where Ian, for all his flaws, is able to change. He can grow.
Yeah.
He recognizes that sometimes the best way to succeed is to work together and not to constantly compete.
And for Dave, maybe it's about letting go a little bit of that resentment.
Yeah.
He can see that Ian is at least trying, even if it's in his own way.
It's a really powerful message, too, especially in a family film. It reminds us that people aren't just good or bad.
Totally.
Like, we all have the capacity for both.
We do.
Yeah.
And maybe, just maybe, there's hope for even the most unlikely friendships.
Maybe.
Okay, so we've talked about ambition, we've talked about redemption, the pressures of the music industry. What's the big takeaway for you? What can we, watching these movies, actually learn from a character like Ian Hawke?
Well, I mean, on the surface, he's a cautionary tale about what happens when your ambition is unchecked.
Yeah.
When you prioritize success above everything else, your relationships, your integrity.
It's that classic idea that the ends justify the means.
Exactly.
Which we know never really works out.
Never. No, it never does.
Okay. But he also shows us how important resilience is. Even after hitting rock bottom, he picks himself up, dusts himself off, even finds a little humor in it.
He does, and he is resourceful.
So resourceful.
Which, again, can be used for good or for bad.
That's true.
But it does remind me of that saying, it's not about how many times you fall down, it's about how many times you get back up.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so to wrap this up then,
Okay.
if you could give our listener one piece of advice inspired by Ian Hawke's journey, what would it be?
That's a good one.
Yeah.
I think it would be this. Embrace your ambition.
Okay.
That drive that you have to succeed.
Yeah.
But never let it be in the cost of your integrity or your relationships.
Love that.
Yeah, and if you stumble, if you make mistakes, don't be afraid to laugh at yourself, learn from it, and then just get back up.
Perfectly said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this surprisingly insightful deep dive.
Yeah, it was. Who knew?
Right. Ian Hawke. Who knew?
Who knew?
That was great. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I always love it.
And to everyone listening at home, thanks for joining us for another deep dive. We'll see you next time.